Today we're going to learn about conjunctions, especially conjunctions of time. Conjunctions are very important in English because they help us connect words, phrases, and clauses, so our sentences become clearer and more natural. In simple terms, a conjunction is a word that joins ideas together. For example, instead of saying two short sentences separately, we can combine them to explain when something happens. In this lesson, we will focus on conjunctions of time. These are words that help us describe when one action happens in relation to another action. Some common conjunctions of time are when, after, before, while, until, as soon as, whenever, and by the time. These words are very useful when we talk about daily activities, plans, or work situations. Let's start with some basic examples. The conjunction after describes something that happens later than another action. For example, I'll go to the bakery after I finish work. The firefighter rested after he finished his shift. The journalist wrote an article after she interviewed the politician. In these sentences, the second action happens first and the main action happens later. Another very common conjunction is before, which describes something that happens earlier than another action. For example, I always have breakfast before I go to work. The architect checks the plans before he starts building. The athlete stretches before she begins training. Notice that when we talk about the future, we usually use the present simple after these conjunctions, not the future form. For example, I will call you after I arrive, not after I will arrive. The conjunction when is used to describe the moment something happens. For example, when I get home, I'll start cooking dinner. When the reporter arrives, the interview will begin. When the meeting finishes, the manager will send the report. It helps us connect two actions that happen around the same time. Now let's look at while, which usually describes two actions happening at the same time. For example, while I was walking my dog, it started to rain. The journalist was writing an article while the photographer was taking pictures. The chef was preparing food while the waiter was serving customers. We often use continuous tenses with while to emphasize that the actions were in progress at the same moment. Another useful conjunction is until, which describes an action that continues up to a certain point in time. For example, we won't leave the office until the work is finished. The babysitter stayed with the children until their parents arrived. The detective worked on the case until he found the truth. In these sentences, the action continues before a specific moment. The conjunction as soon as describes something that happens immediately after another action. For example, please call me as soon as you arrive. The manager promoted her as soon as she completed the project. I will apply for the job as soon as I finish my studies. This conjunction emphasizes that the second action happens very quickly after the first. Another time expression is whenever, which means every time something happens. For example, whenever I visit Dublin, I meet my best friend. Whenever the coach speaks, the athletes listen carefully. Whenever the journalist publishes an article, many people read it. This shows that the action is repeated regularly. We can also use by the time to describe something that will happen before or at a certain moment in the future. For example, everyone will be asleep by the time you arrive. By the time the meeting starts, the manager will have prepared the report. This expression helps us explain the result of an action before a specific moment. Another interesting point is that after some of these conjunctions, especially after, before, when, and while, we can sometimes use a gerund, ing form, instead of a full clause when the subject is the same. For example, after finishing work, he went to the bakery. Before leaving the office, she checked her emails. He listened to music while working. This structure helps us make our sentences shorter and more natural. To summarize, conjunctions of time help us explain the relationship between actions in time. Words such as after, before, when, while, until, as soon as, whenever, and by the time allow us to describe events in the correct order and connect ideas more clearly. Learning how to use these conjunctions will help you speak and write more naturally when describing daily routines, work situations, and future plans.